Welcome to the Triple XRS podcast with me, Anushka Lakhani, here to let you know that no matter what you face in life, you are not alone. We do this through a safe and judgment-free community where we share relatable stories for relatable students from relatable scenes. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Triple XRS podcast. I'm so excited for today's episode because today we are covering, I think it's the first time we've gone so student focused, because a lot of you have been saying, hey, you know what, how about we see some kind of like episodes on students and like specific study tips, and especially with universities. So if you are 14 and above, you are going to love this episode because we're going to cover everything and anything related to universities. None other than an Ivy League graduate. That's right, we have the people from the big leagues over here. It is none other than the incredible Anushka Lakhani. She is a young professional who recently graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a double major in politics, philosophy, and economics, as well as psychology. And the thing is, here's a little fun fact, she actually transferred to UPenn from NYU. So this girl is like smart, all right? She was born and raised in Dubai, so she's a Dubai girl, and she did the IB program again, like crazy smart. It's rigorous, all right? Before venturing out to the United States for college and for work. She is a relentless optimist, psychology whiz, and something that you will be certain of by the end of this episode, a certified yapper. And this part she has not told me to add into her introduction, so this is me just going off on it, but she is just the kindest person ever, the best person to have a conversation with. She's so warm, so welcoming, and she is just incredibly wise. So that the kind of wisdom, the kind of advice she's going to give here in today's episode, where we cover practically everything, like application process to what you should be doing if you're in high school, to dorm life, and literally we're going to be covering everything. I actually met her at my tuition center, and I have been so grateful for that tuition center ever since. Give it up for the one and only Anushka Lakhani. Is that how you say your last name?
That is exactly it. You're also Cindy, so I think you got it.
I am, yeah. I was gonna say, the Ani, there's just an automatic connect over there when
Yeah,
it comes.
the Ani will do it.
The Ani will do it. Yes, so how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I am working from home, so I'm here, and my boss doesn't know I'm here, but that's okay.
Thank you so much, and we do apologize if your boss does end up seeing this. I doubt, because this is for students. But I mean, again, your boss is probably a
You
student
never
of mine.
know. The Instagram algorithm does crazy things.
Does crazy things. We'll just make sure not to mention that first part. Okay, so today's episode is all for the kids who are going through, I would say, an existential quarter life crisis right now, because you don't know what university you want to get into, what you have to do, and trust me, been there. I don't think I've done that yet because
Just
I'm
yet,
still,
just yet.
yeah, just yet. I'm still in the middle of every now and then having like a mini breakdown, but here is a person who has, all right? So first of all, I believe you did graduate from University of Pennsylvania this year, so congratulations.
Thank you.
Now I have
Yeah.
a question. What made you choose UPenn specifically?
Okay, so I actually transferred to Penn. I straight out of undergrad went to NYU for a year. In high school, we were the first ever graduating class, and so it was 20 of us. And I knew I wanted to do something that was like very deeply out of my comfort zone. Um, and I was like, New York is definitely that, like out in the big city. And quite frankly, I loved that first year. I feel like there was such a range of academic diversity. Um, and it was really fun to just like be able to see my peers very passionate about like music business or like video making and like philosophy, like all sorts of interests. And then when COVID hit, I actually came back to Dubai for like a year and a half, and I applied to transfer more because I wanted more of a school that had like that community spirit. I knew I wanted like a campus, and I don't think I realized that much until I was at NYU for a year. And I think I definitely found that I still wanted to be in a city. I like grew up in Dubai. I was like a Dubai girl through and through. And so it was nice to have access to a small enclosed space where you felt part of like a big community where I could like join clubs, um, but then also be able to go out and like volunteer in Philadelphia, like become a tourist for basically 3 years of college and explore different neighborhoods with my friends. So I feel like striking that balance, I really got at a place like Penn.
That's incredible. And I think you only find that out, when you actually experiment. I was thinking because, again, Dubai girl, born and brought up,
Right.
so and my bond with my family is incredibly strong. I do want to study abroad, but you know how moms are, like, they'll like emotionally blackmail you. And so you said you transferred. You can transfer, is there like a limit to, what's the latest you can transfer? Is it like first, second, third year? How does it
I
go?
think it's usually the latest is sophomore year, so your second year of college. I transferred after my first year, but like just to throw a little wisdom in there too, like I remember when I was applying to colleges the first time around, there was like my counselor or someone who was like, don't worry, like, you never know, like where you start might not be where you end up. And then I was like 17, I did not want to hear that. I was like, I have my eyes set on one goal and I need to get there right now. And I was like, I'm not doing all of this again. And honestly, like when I got into NYU, I didn't go in there with like, I'm gonna transfer. I quite enjoyed it for like the time that I was there. But I also was like, be flexible and like take chances and like let life take you and guide you to the place that you're probably meant to be.
Yeah, there's a new thing going on Instagram. It's like if you feel a connection to a certain place, it's because your story is waiting there for you. Have you seen those kind of?
Mm,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
I'm
maybe
that's
that's
basically my algorithm. I'm on that side of Instagram and TikTok. So when people are like, I waste so much time on TikTok, I'm like, I feel like I get like my horoscope on TikTok. I get self-help, like everything, journaling prompts, crafting ideas, like everything is on TikTok for me.
that's great as well because you have to change your algorithm so that it uplifts you rather than brings you down, which is great.
Totally.
I feel like we could go on and on because look at us already bonding.
Love
But
it.
getting back to topic here. So when you said
Yeah.
transfer, right, you have to go through the entire application process again. You can't just like copy paste your Common App essays.
No. Uh, well, the idea of transferring is that by the time you've done a year of college, you have very different experiences and stories to tell, new experiences that have hopefully shaped you into a different person. And so if you are copy and pasting those same essays, chances are you haven't done the growing that you probably need to do to transfer and realize that you need to transfer. The funny thing is, so when COVID started, um, I took a gap year for like a year and a bit before transferring. And I like knew pretty early on, I think as everyone did a lot of COVID reflecting, and I knew pretty early on that I wanted to throw out a couple of transfer applications. Um, and being the tryhard that I was at the time, I was like, I'm going to start writing these essays a year and a half before. Because I was like, I'm taking a gap year. The funny thing is, as the deadline approached a year later, and granted, I wasn't even in college this time, the deadline approached a year later, I looked back at those essays and I was like, this is not who I am at all. Like who I was in like June of what was it, 2020 was like absolutely not even who I was like January 2021. And so take that time, do the reflecting, and I think the stories will naturally be different.
And that's beautiful, especially I think because everyone changed a lot during a period like COVID. But as you do during your life. So again, I know these questions may sound completely dumb to you, but we come
No,
from like
not at
no
all.
understanding background. So when you transferred, right, when you moved, so obviously you came back here for COVID, was it that, NYU, you just finished your first year and you could stay like that? You did not have to renew for your second year, but you were still in NYU? Like, how did that work? If you
Yeah,
had to take a
I
gap
so
year?
So what I did is you can take a leave of absence. So you can just request a year or like a semester long leave of absence, and that's essentially like a gap year. I also knew that I went into college like doing international relations. I did a lot of like climate activism in high school. Um, and I would be what you would call a social justice warrior at the time. And I still think that lives in me, but I don't think I found exactly what I wanted in a major at the time. Um, and when I came back, I honestly didn't even know Penn existed when I was applying in high school. I like thought it was an engineering school, and one of my good friends was like EDing there. And so I was like, I don't know, it's like I had heard of the name, but I like didn't, I was like, yeah, this is for like the engineers. Like this isn't for like everyone else. And I like rediscovered it much later, and I was like, wow, they have this PPE program that would be like the perfect intersection of everything I'm interested in. PPE, for context, is not PPE suit, which it's come to be referred to over COVID. It's philosophy, politics, economics. My friends always joke, they were like, you can't major and minor in everything, because I like could never decide just one thing I was interested in. I'm like very scatterbrained, so I enjoy having a bunch of different interests and then linking them all together. And I think that major really brought all of that together. And I like learned a wealth of different sorts of information and different ways of thinking. Um, and again, I get a lot of slack for this even in college, but I was like, well, you'll just feel that it's right. Like this might be a little more cheesy, but like truly when you're in the right place, you just get like a gut feeling of like, I'm meant to be here. Even on my roughest days, I'm meant to be here.
And that's beautiful, isn't it? Because you need something that always has you, keeps you going, whether that's, being in college or just in life in general, like your purpose, what motivates you to be here. But that brings us to a question that I get a lot, actually, and it's something that I've been wondering as well, right? So, in terms of extracurriculars and stuff you did outside of school, now the advice that I've been getting is if you know what you want to do early on, you should kind of mold your extracurriculars or community projects or passion projects to be linked to that. How did you do it? Is that how it works? Can you give us a bit of an overview into what you did for your extracurriculars?
I think especially early on, take the time to explore like a range of different interests. Like you said, you're 15. Yeah. Ah, that warms my heart. Um, but when you're at that age, like 14, 15, 16, like even 17, I guess, but like take some time to try a bunch of different extracurriculars, put your hands in all the pots, see what you like, and as high school progresses, you will naturally find yourself enjoying or gravitating towards certain things. And so I always say it's not about being rounded, it's about being rounded with a point. And it's like, it doesn't have to be the most obvious point either. It doesn't mean that like you're doing MUN and debate. You can, but that's not the only route to go. I was part of this like engineering like launch X MIT club, but I was like doing stuff on like their social community side. And so it's like try different things and figure out what you enjoy and what speaks to you. And when it comes to writing those essays, if you can tell a story that's like authentic to you and authentic to how you actually became interested in these things, it'll make sense on paper. But like make sense of it on paper after, as opposed to trying to do things to fit a story that you don't even know exists just yet.
I think that is so beautiful because that is like I don't know if you've seen that one thing in Gilmore Girls. There's that. Have you? I'm assuming you've watched Gilmore Girls.
I haven't. My mom and my sister watch it together. I haven't gotten into it just
Okay,
yet.
well that is an absolute must. That's what fuels every. I mean, at least for me, that's what fueled my. Okay, I need to go to get into an Ivy, or at least I want to. But there's basically two academic rivals. One of them has been preparing writing her essays since she was like 12, and so I think it fits into this whole
Interesting.
thing where it's like let the story come out. Don't try and force yourself into something. So just a little
Absolutely.
bit of an example for those of you who have probably watched Gilmore Girls and are geeks like me.
No, totally.
That's
This, oh, sorry. I just had another cheesy thing to say. No,
no,
but
but
totally.
totally,
I
I
completely
completely
agree
agree.
with like let the story unfold. I always use this analogy, and even now in my life, like you think that getting into college is like the last of it, and there will always be uncertainty, and there will always be like more goals you're striving for, and like answers you don't have. And I think this is something that I've come to use a lot recently as like a framework in my own life, is like draw a map and don't color it in. And so it's like, I want to go to college in America and potentially study international relations. But it's like, don't color in and don't color it in so deeply that when things work out according to a different plan that's for you, that you're going to be upset that you didn't get the exact thing you wanted. So even now, I'm like, I want to work in like creative strategy on the East Coast. And it's like, where on the East Coast? Which creative strategy firm? Like all of that, like let life bring the colors to life. I guess, in the corniest way.
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, which I think, and the thing is, when people say this kind of stuff to you, when you're actually uncertain, you're like, oh my God, just give me an answer. Like, I had that kind of breakdown, I would say, probably 3 weeks back when it was like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to major in? All right, yeah, at least start getting an idea. And I was like, oh my God, just like give me two options and I'll pick, or like I'll eeny, meeny, miny, mo this stuff. Like, I can't think, you know? So I love what you said about trying everything and then not, fixating on what you want. Oh,
Oh,
and I've
thanks too.
gotten a few DMs actually for this episode. A lot of people want to ask you, how did you fix, where you wanted to study? As in, obviously, you told us about the school, you told us what you wanted, but as in location wise, was it something that appealed to you
Mhm.
about America, their application process?
Totally.
They do get you to write extra essays, but perhaps, I don't know, maybe you like that?
So I've always been a writer. That's something I've enjoyed. So to be completely honest, I love the essay component of it. That was not the reason I applied to America. That was like an added bonus, but also an added stressor, I will say. As much as you can enjoy writing when you're like in IB or like even A levels and have 100 things on your plate, it feels like just one more extra thing you have to do. The thing that really drew me to America or university education here was I said earlier, I've always enjoyed a bunch of different things, and I really love making connections between different concepts. I did like the IB program where you have to pick one subject from every bucket. Right. And so you're always forced to learn everything. And so I started to like derive value out of that. And I think when I was 17, 18, I knew that I liked international relations at the time, but I hadn't had any experience in it to know that this is what I wanted to commit the rest of my life to. And so a lot of people from my grade went to the UK. So I think it was like five of us that went to America, or maybe even less than that, three. A lot of people went to the UK, and I think a lot of them knew exactly what they wanted to do and wanted to commit the next 3 to 6 years to pursue it. For me, I loved the idea of like absorbing new information and like the liberal arts curriculum where like you are required to take like classes across different areas, which to be honest, some of those science classes and stat classes were the bane of my existence in college. Um, but I also learned a lot of new and interesting things that I didn't think I would have the opportunity to learn. Like my senior spring, I took a class called Data Science for the Humanities. Um, and we like analyzed like the number of times certain words appear in books and then made like arguments out of that. But we used Python to be able to do it. And so I
Oh,
was like, I
great.
would have never gotten that in the UK. Or I took a video making class as one of my distribution requirements, like the core requirements. And I was like, I get to try all of these different things and still check off like boxes that I'm required to check off by the university. So it seems like a win-win to me.
Yeah, and you just actually simultaneously answered another question about what curriculum you picked. So you did DP, a little word of wisdom on current IB students. Or maybe even, do you think personally that there's a bit of a preference for students who take IB? Just,
I don't think so. I think when it comes to IB and A levels, do whichever one is better suited to you. I was like a PYP, NYP, IB kid through and through. And so it just made natural sense for me to like go into IB afterwards. Um, I had a lot of friends who did like IGCSE and then switched to IB, and it definitely is a transition because from what I understand, IGCSE is a lot more like content and knowledge heavy, whereas IB, PYP, MYP is very like essays, critical thinking. And so just by virtue of like doing that since grade three, I think my brain was molded to think in a certain way. Um, and so I mean, IB was definitely very challenging, but my point is don't feel inclined to do it because you think universities will think that your application is stronger for that reason. That's not true at all. I know a lot of friends who did A levels and still ended up at all the same places.
well, that is my sign that I'm going to drop out of IB soon. And I'm joking. I
So
toodles.
key
No,
takeaway from this podcast.
is that Ivy is not for you. This is your sign. Leave. No, I will say though, because I came from a British curriculum and it's very similar to IGCSE. And so I
Uh,
have seen the way that my brain has shifted. And I do curse IB sometimes, but like with criteria D, especially like in math, you can get away with any answer as long as you explain it right, which is like, okay, thanks, because math is, that's why I was there at the tuition center.
Yeah. I also think this is another side note, but like if you do have a tutor or a teacher like in high school, outside of high school, in college, like even at work, like a manager, like you have to just allow yourself to put so much trust in them and like let them guide you without the fear of being embarrassed. Like they are there because you don't have all the answers, so like let them give you the answers. Just another nugget of wisdom.
He actually loves you so much because he's kind of strict about like what days you can take off and whatnot with the scheduling. And of course, a lot of kids come in, and I was like, "Oh, sir, I actually won't be able to come Tuesday because I'm interviewing Anushka. You remember her?" And she's like, "Oh, no, yeah, yeah, okay, say hi to her for me." I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna use that excuse next time. Like it works. It's
Just
perfect."
part two of the podcast, sir. Part 55 of the same podcast, sir.
Exactly, sir. It's the same podcast. She's just agreed to come on every time.
She's just
Um,
the new host now, actually. Her and I are
co-hosting with me.
co-hosting it.
It's not on me, sir. It's you have to talk to her. I think now we're going to move on to the actual application process itself. So I've gotten advice to take APs and standardized tests. Like personally, I prefer the SAT, and I'll probably be taking it next year. So which one did you take? What APs did you take? If you took, and if you can remember the scores, can you tell us? I'm sure obviously they were great because
It's a long time
look at you.
ago. Okay, let me think. I did not take APs at all. I don't think that you need to. I've been hearing this a lot recently. I know people who take APs on the side with like A levels. Perhaps it's like an added bonus. I don't think that you need to. Like APs are part of like an American curriculum, and a lot of the kids who do the American curriculum just take the APs. I think like putting so much pressure on yourself to do like A levels or IB, and then on top of that, take a whole other curriculum is a lot. I mean, if you feel like it's beneficial, like go for it. Me personally, I didn't take it, so I probably can't speak too much to that. And then I tried taking both the SAT and the ACT. People tend to do better on one or the other. I would say if you can early on, take like a practice test for both and just see, or take maybe two practice tests for both. Not like the real exams. Don't just go and sign up for the real exams. Take those practice tests like in timed conditions after doing a little bit of prep and see which one your brain is better suited for. Like ACT to me seems like it's like a time speedy thing. And SAT requires a little bit more comprehension. Um, I eventually applied test optional, to be completely honest. I did the IB and they allowed me to apply test optional, and so I did. So that's another thing is like these standardized testing papers are very suited to kids who grew up in America and did that like multiple choice questions from when they were really little. So if it is challenging for you and you are doing incredibly well in school, if there's one thing you take away from this, know that that is normal. Like you are still an incredibly bright person and incredibly intelligent, and these tests just measure how well you were able to take this test. And so don't sweat it too much if you aren't doing well. I like tutor for like college admissions and stuff like on the side, and I had this one student who he kept trying to take the SAT and ACT and it was just like not working for him. And I was like, it literally now colleges are even realizing that this is not the hill that they want to die on, and so many schools are going test optional. So if you feel like the rest of your application is really strong and you're not getting the scores that you want, my personal advice would be to pour your energy into the things that you can control. And if you need to apply test optional, like there is no shame in that. Just apply test optional. You can still be incredibly successful if you don't get a 1600 on the SAT. If that's even what it's out of anymore, I have no idea.
Yes, it is
Okay,
1600. You're not that old. Don't worry
not
about it.
yet.
um, now talking about again the application process, right?
Yeah.
Um, what for you? Now we obviously heard that you love writing, and obviously if you have your personal statement with you right now, it would be great if you could share it with us. But I think before we get into that, what for you was the most challenging aspect of the application process as a whole?
That's a good question. Let me think. I'd say the first time around, balancing the whole application process while still maintaining my grades during IB and extracurriculars was definitely challenging. I think everyone has that struggle. Like I still say, I think year 12 and 13 was probably the busiest I have been in my whole entire life. Like I don't even think I was that busy in college ever. Like IB was just a grind because it's so many things and they all feel so deeply high stakes. My one piece of advice for that challenge would be communicate with your teachers. They're like your allies. Like if you do think at some point when the pressure ramps up on the application process side that you are maybe gonna drop the ball mildly, just communicate with them and be like, hey, like this stuff is really tough for me right now. And I'm trying to balance both of those things, but I might not be on my A game. And I think you can do that if you've spent the first few months at least really being there, being present in your classes, like asking the questions, doing the work and like pouring your energy into building a solid foundation. It builds you a little bit of like a buffer even in your teacher relationships to then lean on them later and be like, hey, you know that I have the capacity to work really hard and do well. I just don't have that capacity right now because I'm focusing on other things. And so just be honest and open. Like these programs are really difficult, but you're also human. And like your teachers are also human, so they'll understand. Don't suffer alone is
That's
what I
so
will say.
beautiful. That is so beautiful. And yeah, I mean, if you're giving 100%, then obviously they're gonna, no matter what kind of teacher they are, they will at the end of the day understand what's going on. In general, when it comes to essays,
Mm,
right? What tips would you give people? Now, you are a naturally good writer, but some people have to, maybe they don't enjoy writing as much. So what tips would you give them? And specifically with, I would say, the American side of Common App essays.
yeah. I think my big tip is to let's see, probably two things. One is don't be afraid to use your voice in the essay and let that come through. Like, I'm a very like quirky, sometimes dorky, like sarcastic person. And if you read my essays, I think that's pretty evident. Like, I'll use grammatical things like writing funny things in brackets or whatever. And it's like I think a lot of people feel like the tone of this essay needs to be very formal. Um, and like God forbid you crack a joke, they're gonna think of you some kind of way. But like they're building a class full of different and distinct personalities, and you are going to be a personality that adds to that mix and adds flavor to that mix. And so don't be afraid to let that shine through. I think like not to be like, oh, be authentic, but like let your true voice come through in those essays. Don't be scared to do that. In fact, if anything, that's a strength. It shows that you have the courage to show up as yourself unapologetically, and that's like a really big soft skill that you can have. So that's one thing. The second thing is you were like, oh, you're a really good writer. Even now, I write as part of my job, and I have so much imposter syndrome consistently because there's always people, when you read their work, you're like, oh, that was brilliant. And these people at my work, like, they'll write the things that I can write in like if it'll take me an hour to write it, they've written it in like 7 minutes. And so don't be afraid to write a draft that is like shitty. Like my first draft was just a brain dump. Like no one is seeing this but you. Get all the thoughts on paper. No need to refine it. Just like if you need to set a timer and just like brainstorm a bunch of ideas. Like say you look at those prompts for the Common App and there's like, I don't know, 7 different options. Just like write out whatever comes to mind for each one and get it all out of your brain. That's part of like the writing process. And then after that, step number two is like revisit those drafts, see what sticks, like maybe narrow down the list of questions that you feel interested in. And then go through again and again. Like I think by the time I submitted my actual essay, it was like on Google Docs, like version 21 or something. Like, and save your past versions. Like, save all, like, every time you edit, create a new draft and edit the new version. Because sometimes it's like we've been in the weeds for so long that you end up eliminating some of the good stuff. But know that it is very normal to not have a refined, articulate draft the first time around. In fact, that is part of the process. So like, don't hold yourself to that crazy standard either. Yeah.
And I think what people have started using nowadays is something called a brag sheet. So every time you do something good, you have like a little sheet where you put like, oh, this is my accomplishment and maybe what it helped you to learn. So I think it makes the essay writing process a lot more easier as well when you are having that little brain dump. Um,
hmm
so just something to keep in mind. Although obviously I
That's
haven't
a
tried it, so
no, that's a great pointer actually. I think of that as like maybe on the more personal side of the essays, like if you journal or like if life experience if like you experience something in life, having like a journal often pushes you to like reflect on what you learned from that experience. And a lot of those like maybe non-academic experiences are also very crucial when you're writing these essays, or even just like when you're going about life, just like what you learned from certain experiences. So I think it always helps to have something like that. Even at work, we have like a little, I think I had gotten this advice from someone where they were like, collect a little wins document, like little projects you do well on, conversations that go well, just like collect those wins so that even when you're, I honestly have not started doing this just yet. I've been kind of lazy about it. Um, but it's like, oh, on those rough days, or even if you need to like negotiate your salary, like you have things to point to of like these are the really good things I did while I was here.
yeah, that really helps. I started this thing this year where it's like again what you said, the little wins. You have like a little jar where you kind of write something nice about your day or something nice about yourself in that jar. So obviously, again, I haven't been very consistent with that, but anytime you're feeling rough, you just go to the jar or you go to your phone in the notes app, whatever, and you see it, and it makes you feel a lot better. So that does really help. Now, in your application process, if there is anything, looking back that you feel like, oh, I want to change this, what would it be,
Mm.
if anything?
Let me ponder on that one. It's also been, again, I was like, it's been a really long time. Um, I think because I transferred, if there was anything I had to change, I probably did it differently the second time around. I think as a person, I try to operate with not having any regrets because I'm like, whatever decisions I made taught me something that I needed to learn at that point. So maybe let that be the takeaway from this is like you are submitting this application as this version of you. And so my current version can look at those essays or whatever and critique them or look at whatever I put and like think that it's cheesy or corny or cringe. But that those things were true to that version of me. And I think that's what they want to see. They don't want a class of a 25-year-old as a freshman. I'm not 25, by the way. But it's like they don't want a class of like an old person as a freshman. They want your freshman dorky self who like doesn't have the answers. So if like you don't have the answers, like that's okay. That's the point. So to be fair, I think like my application reflected the version of me that I was at that point, who was like starry-eyed and kind of nerdy and funny. And I think that came through. So I don't think that I would change anything.
Well, that's great, and I love the way that you look at it. No regrets. And I think that again, the beauty of the whole Common App essay thing is that it helps you to reflect who you are. So great answers all around. Now, for the application process, because you did both NYU and UPenn, so what surprised you about the two different colleges, and were there any similarities, or were there any differences that kind of said, oh, this is like quite specific to UPenn, or oh, this is quite specific to NYU?
Are you asking in terms of the college itself or the application process?
I think we can go with the application process first and then talk us to the colleges.
Okay. So because I applied to NYU as a freshman and Penn as a transfer, the original essay was a little different. Penn, I wrote a transfer statement, whereas NYU, I wrote like I answered one of those Common App prompts. And then I think Penn at the time had another. It was like a Y Penn essay, but it was like it was divided into extracurricular and academic. If I'm not wrong, I could be wrong. Um, and then NYU, I think, had a why NYU essay and the Common App essay. And then the rest of the application, I think, looks very similar on Common App. So nothing too crazy there. I think different schools will have different prompts that you have to answer. I believe Penn now has one asking people what they're most grateful or to write a gratitude letter to Penn, which is interesting. I took a science of well-being class my senior spring, but with Martin Seligman, who is like the founder of the field of positive psychology, and it was founded at Penn. And he was saying he was part of the process with the admissions people who originally came up with this like gratitude letter essay because they realized when kids come to Penn or to colleges, like you become very jaded. Um, and he was like, I think this is like a really good way of them to help them put into perspective early on, like what would you be grateful for in a day to day if you did go to college here? And remember that when you do come to college here.
Right. So always, and gratitude, I mean, there was an experiment where people started off with like 2% level of happiness. When they wrote it down, it went 4%. And when they actually told the person who they were grateful to, whatever they wrote down, it went to like almost 18, 19%. So gratitude always has a very nice effect. And I love the fact that they've implemented it into the process. Even though it may be more writing for you, think about it on a deeper level, and I think it's really, really interesting how they do that. Now, thank you so much for that. Very, very helpful. And I find that this is a very common trend with students, teenagers, that when we're talking about stuff related to like college applications and careers, if you kind of like throw all the information in their face, I know this very much applies to me as well. You kind of like are unable to comprehend all of that. So for that purpose, we're gonna pause the episode right here. We're gonna give you a bit of time to comprehend what we just discussed in this episode when it comes to, Anushka's experiences in NYU and UPenn, transfer applications. How does the transfer system work? How does the essay writing work for specifically US-based applications? And then obviously, you got technical with us in the SAT side, with your extracurriculars. And in part two, we're going to be talking about the difference in experience between NYU and UPenn when it comes to applications, the application process, as well as campus life, because I know for a fact NYU does not have a traditional campus. We were in New York just a month ago, and it was beautiful because it was very city life, like, very New York coded. Whereas UPenn, I know for a fact, has a traditional campus. So that would be very interesting to look at, and obviously we are looking at this in part two, is what elements do you need to consider when it comes to picking your colleges, right? What is it that you're looking for in the college? Because that's where you're going to spend a lot of your time. And then the most important things we're going to be covering in our next episode is how to create new friends. Applies to school, applies to college, applies to real life. Balancing life and, school or work. Picking your courses is something that even me personally, I struggle with. A lot of people I know are having difficulties regarding this area, so it's going to be very cool to hear your advice on this topic. And then obviously dealing with the potential rejection that comes with these application processes is very, very important. And of course, answering all the questions that our lovely listeners that you guys sent in for Anushka. So we'll see you in part two. Till then, this is the Triple XRS podcast with me, Ashna Takhtani, and Anushka Lakhani, here to let you know that no matter what you face in life, you are not alone.
1, 2.